When an avoidant runs, it can feel personal, like something about you was too much, too emotional, too needy, too intense. And if you've been through that pattern more than once, you start shrinking without realizing it. You start editing yourself. You start trying to become easy, hoping that if you act less human, they will finally act more committed. But I need you to hear this with kindness and with truth. Avoidants don't run from your love. They run from what your love awakens inside them. The pressure they feel to show up. The fear they feel of being depended on. The panic they feel when closeness starts asking for consistency. And that is why the first keynote matters so much. Avoidants don't run from you. They run from intensity without safety. Because intensity without safety feels like a deadline. It feels like a demand. It feels like a test they might fail. It feels like a spotlight that exposes their emotional limits. And when they feel exposed, they don't lean in. They retreat. They don't say, "I'm scared." They say, "I need space." They don't say, "I don't know how to love consistently." They say, "I'm overwhelmed." They don't say, "I feel like I'm not enough." They say, "You're asking for too much." So if you've ever sat there staring at your phone, thinking, why did my warmth make them colder? Why did my honesty make them vanish? Why did my feelings make them shut down? It's because for an avoidant, closeness can feel like a loss of control. Not control over you, control over themselves, control over their emotions, control over the parts of them that they've kept locked away for years. When someone gets close, those locked doors start rattling, and their nervous system does what it learned to do a long time ago. It escapes. But here is where you regain your power. You stop trying to be less intense, and you start becoming more safe. Not safe in the way that means tolerating disrespect, not safe in the way that means lowering your standards, but safe in the way that means your love is not a storm. Safe in the way that means your emotions are honest, but not chaotic. Your needs are real, but not delivered like a threat. Your closeness is warm, but not suffocating. Because the truth is, many women are intense, but the woman they stay for carries intensity like a candle, not like a wildfire. She can light a room without burning it down. And this is the part that changes everything. Safety is not what you give them when they pull away. Safety is the emotional environment you create even when you are close. Some people think safety means never having expectations, never bringing up feelings, never asking for clarity. And that's not safety, that's self-erasure. Real safety is when you can say what you feel without making them responsible for your stability, and you can ask for what you need without turning it into a courtroom trial, and you can be disappointed without becoming desperate. Because avoidants often confuse love with pressure, especially if their early experiences taught them that love came with conditions, criticism, or emotional unpredictability. So when they meet someone who loves them and also seems afraid, they don't interpret it as devotion, they interpret it as danger. When you text 5 times, when you explain for 3 paragraphs, when you demand reassurance in the middle of their silence, you're not wrong for wanting closeness. But to an avoidant nervous system it sounds like, "I will collapse if you don't hold me." And that message, even if it's untrue, even if you're strong, even if you're simply hurt, can trigger their instinct to run. So the woman they stay for learns a different language. She learns how to speak love without panic in her voice. She learns that she can want someone and still keep her self-respect intact. She learns that she can be emotionally available without being emotionally dependent. That means she doesn't turn every delay into a disaster. She doesn't turn every quiet moment into a crisis. She doesn't treat uncertainty like it's an emergency that must be solved immediately. She breathes, she grounds herself, she gives space without chasing, and she gives closeness without clinging. And listen, this does not mean she tolerates inconsistency forever. It means she responds to inconsistency with calm standards, not with frantic persuasion. She doesn't try to argue someone into emotional maturity. She doesn't try to love someone into showing up. She simply watches the pattern and chooses accordingly. She knows that if someone needs space, fine, but space is not an excuse to disappear without communication. And distance is not a substitute for respect. She can hold her boundaries without raising her voice, because her boundary is not a threat, it's a decision. That is what safety really is. It's predictability, it's emotional steadiness, it's the sense that being close to you does not mean losing themselves. And it also means the sense that being distant from you does not mean you will fall apart. And this is why she becomes unforgettable to an avoidant, because she is the first person who makes closeness feel both warm and clean. Clean meaning there is no guilt, no manipulation, no silent tests, no emotional traps, just honesty and self-control. So if you want to become this woman, don't start by trying to act unbothered. Don't start by playing games. Don't start by punishing silence with silence. Start by strengthening your inner safety. Ask yourself, can I soothe myself when I feel abandoned? Can I sit with discomfort without reaching for someone who has not earned access to me in that moment? Can I hold my standards without begging someone to meet them? Because the more you can regulate your nervous system, the less your love will feel like pressure, and the more it will feel like peace. And when your love feels like peace, an avoidant does something surprising. They stop associating closeness with drowning. They stop bracing for the moment you will demand something they don't know how to give. They relax enough to show you more of themselves, not because you convinced them, but because you made the emotional space safe enough for them to step into. But I need you to remember, this is not about healing them for you. It's about protecting you while you love. Because safety goes both ways. Your heart also needs safety. Your nervous system also needs consistency. Your love also deserves effort. So you don't become safe by becoming smaller. You become safe by becoming steadier. You become safe by being the kind of woman who can say, I care about you and I won't chase you. I enjoy you and I won't abandon myself for you. I can hold closeness and I can also walk away from confusion. And that is the difference between intensity that scares an avoidant and intensity that transforms them. One is intensity fueled by fear. The other is intensity grounded in self-respect. One says, please don't leave me. The other says, I won't leave myself. One feels like a trap. The other feels like a choice. And when an avoidant feels choice, real choice, not emotional coercion, something inside them softens. So if you're asking, are you her? The answer is not in how hard you love. It's in how safe you remain while loving. It's in whether you can stay warm without becoming anxious, whether you can stay honest without becoming frantic, whether you can stay present without losing your center. Because the woman they stay for is not the woman who never needs anything. She is the woman who needs things and still carries herself like she will be okay, with or without someone meeting them. And if you can become that, then no matter who comes into your life, avoidant or not, you will stop begging for stability, because you will be stability. You will stop chasing clarity, because you will live in clarity, and the love that meets you there will finally feel like home. You've seen it happen. They lean in. They look at you like they finally found something real. They soften. They open a little. They let you feel chosen. And then the moment you start believing it, the moment you relax, the moment you let your guard down, they pull away. And your mind does what it always does. It tries to solve the puzzle. It tries to become smarter than their fear. It tries to figure out the perfect way to hold them without losing yourself. But the second key note is the truth that ends the chase. The woman they stay for is calm in her self-respect, not loud in her fear. Because fear is loud, even when it is silent. Fear shows up as overthinking, as checking the phone, as rewriting messages, as reading meaning into delays, as needing reassurance in a way that feels urgent, as asking for clarity with a trembling heart, hoping they will finally hold you the way you want to be held. And listen, wanting reassurance is human. Wanting closeness is not weakness. But when your nervous system is running the relationship, it stops feeling like love and starts feeling like survival. And avoidants, more than most, can feel that survival energy. They can feel when your love is turning into a demand for certainty, and their system reacts to that demand like a threat, even if you never meant it that way. So the woman they stay for does something rare. She feels the fear, but she does not obey it. She gets triggered, but she doesn't turn her trigger into a performance. She misses them, but she doesn't chase them. She wants clarity, but she refuses to beg for it. She is not cold. She is not detached in a cruel way. She is simply anchored. She has a quiet dignity that tells the truth without shouting. And that quiet dignity is exactly what an avoidant cannot manipulate, cannot outrun, and cannot forget. Because here is what you need to understand. An avoidant often expects one of two reactions. They expect you to chase, to plead, to explain, to become emotional, to turn the connection into a constant negotiation. And when you do, it confirms their belief that closeness equals pressure. Or they expect you to punish, to attack, to become icy, to disappear, to try to control them with silence. And when you do, it confirms their belief that intimacy equals danger. But the woman they stay for offers a third experience. She remains warm, and she remains steady, and she remains unavailable to chaos. And that is why she stands out. Not because she is perfect, not because she never cares too much, but because she has a relationship with herself that is stronger than her desire to be chosen. She doesn't abandon herself to keep someone else comfortable. She doesn't shrink her needs into hints. She doesn't turn love into a bargaining chip. She knows who she is, and because she knows who she is, she doesn't try to convince anyone else. Let me speak directly to the part of you that has been trying so hard. You thought your intensity was love, and in many ways it was. You were loyal, you were present. You were willing to communicate, you were willing to repair, you were willing to fight for something real. But an avoidant doesn't need you to fight for love. They need you to stand for your worth. They need to feel that your love is a gift, not a request. They need to feel that you can be close without clinging, that you can feel without flooding, that you can care without collapsing. The woman they stay for has boundaries that don't come from anger. They come from self-respect, and self-respect doesn't beg. Self-respect doesn't threaten. Self-respect doesn't send 10 messages trying to get one honest answer. Self-respect says, I'm here, and I'm not going to twist myself into a shape that makes you comfortable while it breaks me. It says, I value connection, and I value consistency. It says, you can take your space, but you cannot take my peace. And this is where it becomes emotional, because you have to be willing to disappoint the version of you that was addicted to being chosen. You have to be willing to stop proving. You have to be willing to let silence be information, not a challenge. You have to be willing to sit with discomfort and still keep your dignity. That is not easy, especially if you grew up feeling like love had to be earned. If you learned that being good meant being accommodating. If you learned that your needs were too much, and so you became the kind of person who would rather give than be left. But the woman they stay for, she breaks that pattern. She doesn't make her anxiety the leader. She doesn't make her fear the narrator. She becomes her own safe place first. She learns how to calm herself, how to regulate her emotions, how to feel the ache without handing the ache to someone else and saying, fix this for me. Because that, right there, is the power. When your stability comes from inside you, the avoidant cannot control you with distance. And when they realize they cannot control you with distance, they face themselves. They can no longer rely on you to chase them back into connection. They can no longer disappear and assume you'll be waiting with open arms and a broken heart. They have to choose show up or lose access. And the woman they stay for does not announce that as a threat. She lives it as a standard. So imagine this, they pull away, and instead of spiraling, you pause, you breathe. You remind yourself, I do not need to earn someone's effort. You continue your life. You keep your routines. You keep your friendships. You keep your focus. You don't post to get their attention. You don't send a message to test them. You don't create drama so they will come back and feel needed. You simply remain yourself, and in that calm, you communicate the loudest message of all, I can love you, and I can lose you, and I will still be okay. And that message does something deep to an avoidant. It removes the pressure, because you are not forcing closeness, but it also removes the comfort, because you are not guaranteeing access. It creates a clean space where their choice becomes visible. And that is why they stay for her, because her calm is not emptiness, it is strength. Now I want to be clear, this does not mean you accept crumbs with a smile. Calm self-respect is not passive. Calm self-respect is fierce in a quiet way. It is saying, I want a partner, not a visitor. I want consistency, not confusion. I want love that shows up on ordinary days, not only when you feel lonely. And if you cannot meet me there, I will not punish you, but I will remove myself from the cycle. That is the kind of woman they stay for. Not the woman who never cries, but the woman who doesn't beg while crying. Not the woman who never feels hurt, but the woman who doesn't hand her worth to someone else's mood. Not the woman who acts like she doesn't care, but the woman who cares and still chooses herself. And if you're wondering how to become her, start with one decision. The next time your fear tells you to chase, choose to anchor. The next time your anxiety tells you to explain, choose to be clear once. The next time your heart tells you to prove your value, choose to remember it. Because the moment you stop being loud in fear, your presence becomes loud in power. And that is when the dynamic changes, not because you played a game, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself to keep someone else close. You've probably been told, if you want an avoidant to stay, be softer, be easier, be less demanding, ask for less, expect less, and maybe they'll finally feel comfortable enough to choose you. But that advice leaves you empty, because it teaches you how to keep someone while slowly losing yourself. And the third keynote is where your power becomes real. The woman they stay for creates warmth without surrendering her standards. Because warmth without standards becomes pleading. Warmth without standards becomes overachieving. Warmth without standards becomes you smiling while your needs are ignored, you understanding while you're being neglected, you being patient, while your heart is quietly starving. And standards without warmth becomes walls. It becomes punishment. It becomes a cold pride that looks strong, but is actually fear in a different outfit. The woman they stay for holds both. She is soft and she is solid. She is kind and she is clear. She can be loving and she can still say no. And that combination is rare, because most people swing between extremes. When they love, they forget themselves. When they get hurt, they shut down. When they feel uncertain, they cling. When they feel powerless, they punish. But she doesn't move like that. She doesn't love like a victim, and she doesn't protect herself like a threat. She moves like someone who knows what she deserves, and she refuses to trade her worth for temporary closeness. So let me speak to the part of you that has been trying to be the right kind of woman. You thought being warm meant being endlessly understanding. You thought being supportive meant accepting inconsistency. You thought being loving meant staying quiet when something hurt you. But real warmth is not silence. Real warmth is honesty delivered with dignity. Real warmth is, I care about you and I need clarity. Real warmth is, I want to be close to you and I won't chase you. Real warmth is, I can see your fear and I still won't abandon myself to calm it. Avoidants often run when they feel like closeness will cost them freedom, and they stay distant when they think intimacy will become obligation. But the woman they stay for doesn't make love feel like a cage. She makes love feel like a choice, and she also makes it feel like a responsibility. She doesn't demand their soul on day one. She doesn't act like commitment is a trap. She simply sets a rhythm that says, if you want to be here, you show up. Not perfectly, not like a robot, but consistently enough that my heart can rest. And standards are not rules you shout at someone. Standards are what you allow. Standards are what you tolerate. Standards are what you excuse and what you refuse to excuse. Standards are the way you respond when someone gives you half love. Do you reward it with more effort, more affection, more access, hoping they'll grow into you? Or do you hold your warmth and also hold the line and say with your actions, I won't train you to be careless with me? This is where it gets emotional. Because having standards means being willing to face loss. It means being willing to say, I would rather be alone than be in a connection that makes me doubt my worth. And that is a terrifying sentence for someone who has been abandoned, for someone who has been replaced, for someone who has learned to hold on even when it hurts. But that willingness is exactly what makes you magnetic, because it tells the truth. My love is not cheap, and access to me is earned through consistency, not through potential. The woman they stay for doesn't use her standards as a weapon. She doesn't keep a scoreboard. She doesn't make a speech every time she's disappointed. She doesn't threaten to leave every week. She's not dramatic. She's decisive. She communicates clearly once, with calm. She says what matters and then she watches behavior. She listens to actions more than words. She doesn't get hypnotized by apologies that don't change patterns. Because an avoidant can be very good at words when they feel cornered. They can say, I'm sorry, I'm just stressed. They can say, I'm not good at relationships. They can say, I need time. They can say, I care about you, I'm just overwhelmed. And maybe they mean it, maybe they truly do. But the woman they stay for doesn't build a future on what someone says in a moment of guilt. She builds it on what someone consistently does when the moment passes. So here's what it looks like in real life. She is warm, she laughs, she listens, she's affectionate, she's present. She makes space for their feelings. She doesn't shame them for needing room. She doesn't attack them for struggling. She doesn't force intimacy with pressure. But she also doesn't accept disappearing acts. She doesn't accept emotional ambiguity that lasts for months. She doesn't accept being treated like an option. And when the pattern shows itself, she responds with quiet courage. She pulls her energy back. She stops over-investing. She stops over-giving. Not because she wants to punish them, but because she wants to protect herself. And this is the moment an avoidant feels something they often avoid feeling: consequences. Not consequences as revenge, consequences as reality. Because when you keep being warm while someone is inconsistent, you accidentally teach them that inconsistency is safe. You teach them that they can give you less, and you will give them more. You teach them that they can leave the door half open, and you will stand in the hallway waiting. But when you stay warm and keep your standards, you teach a different lesson. You teach that love can be gentle and still have structure. Love can be soft and still have boundaries. And do you know why they stay for that kind of woman? Because deep down, an avoidant is exhausted by chaos too. They are exhausted by the emotional intensity that comes from chasing and running. They may not admit it, but part of them wants the clean simplicity of a healthy connection. They just don't know how to be inside it without feeling exposed. And her standards create a container. Her standards make the relationship feel predictable. Her standards make the connection feel safer, because there is less drama, less guessing, less emotional whiplash. But there's another reason they stay. Her standards force them to meet themselves. They can't hide in vagueness. They can't hover forever. They can't keep one foot out the door while enjoying all the benefits of being loved. Her warmth invites them in, but her standards demand a real presence. And that combination is the mirror they can't ignore. Now, if you're listening to this and you feel your chest tighten, it's because you know what you've been doing. You've been trying to keep the peace by swallowing your needs. You've been calling your silence maturity when it was actually fear. You've been calling your patience love when it was actually hope clinging to potential. And I'm not judging you, I understand it. Because when you care, you want to believe, you want to give someone room to grow. You want to be the safe place they never had. But you can be a safe place without becoming a sacrifice. You can be warm without becoming available for mistreatment. You can love deeply without losing your dignity. So become this woman, the one who says, I'm not here to be fought for in moments of panic and neglected in moments of comfort. I'm not here to be a lesson you learn after you lose me. I'm here for a real relationship, with real effort, with real communication, with real consistency. And if you can meet me there, I will give you a love that feels like peace. But if you cannot, I will not beg you to become someone you are refusing to be. And that is how you hold warmth and standards at the same time. You don't harden. You don't chase. You simply become the kind of woman whose love is a gift and whose presence is a privilege. And when you live like that, the avoidant either rises to meet you or they leave. But either way, you stop betraying yourself. And that is the beginning of the love you've been praying for. There is a kind of pain that doesn't come from a breakup. It comes from confusion. It comes from the almost relationship, the half love, the on and off energy that keeps your heart attached while your mind keeps begging for clarity. And if you've ever loved someone avoidant, you know that pain. Because one day they feel close, the next day they feel distant, one day they're soft, the next day they're cold. And you start living your life like you're waiting for a signal. You start scanning, reading, interpreting, hoping, and that hope becomes the chain that keeps you stuck. And this is why the fourth keynote is so powerful. The woman they stay for doesn't confuse inconsistency with chemistry. Because inconsistency can feel like electricity. It can feel exciting. It can feel intense. It can make your nervous system mistake anxiety for passion. And waiting for love can start feeling like love itself. The highs feel higher because the lows are so low. The reunion feels magical because the distance felt like abandonment. And slowly, without even noticing, you stop choosing based on peace, and you start choosing based on relief. Relief is addictive. Relief is that breath you take when they finally text back. Relief is that warmth that returns when they suddenly act loving again. Relief is the moment your chest unclenches and your mind stops spinning. And if you're honest, sometimes you weren't even happy, you were just relieved. Relieved that you still mattered. Relieved that you weren't too much. Relieved that you didn't lose them. And that relief can become the drug that keeps you returning to the same cycle, because the cycle creates the craving, and the craving makes the smallest effort feel like a jackpot. But the woman they stay for, she sees through that illusion. She doesn't deny chemistry. She doesn't pretend feelings don't exist. She simply refuses to make feelings the only evidence. She understands that attraction is not the same as alignment. She understands that intensity is not the same as intimacy. She understands that someone can desire you and still be incapable of loving you well. And that awareness is what protects her, because she doesn't build a future on sparks, she builds it on patterns. Patterns are the truth. Patterns tell you what someone will do when life gets hard, when stress shows up, when vulnerability is required, when consistency is needed, when you're not in the honeymoon phase anymore. Patterns show you whether someone repairs, whether they communicate, whether they take responsibility, whether they show up when it's inconvenient. And avoidants often struggle with those moments, not because they are evil, but because their nervous system has learned to protect itself through distance. So when things get real, they retreat, and the woman who confuses that retreat with chemistry will chase. She will overgive, she will try harder, she will call the push and pull love. But the woman they stay for does something different. She pauses, and she asks herself a simple question: is this consistent? Not, do I want it? Not, do I miss them? Not, do I feel a connection? But, is this stable enough to hold my heart? And that question is the difference between a woman who becomes a lesson and a woman who becomes a turning point. Because when you confuse inconsistency with chemistry, you start excusing things that would have been unacceptable if you felt calm. You start accepting late replies that would have bothered you if you weren't anxious. You start forgiving disappearances because they come back with sweetness. You start lowering standards because the fear of losing them becomes stronger than the pain of being undervalued. And the worst part is, you start blaming yourself. You start thinking, maybe I asked for too much, maybe I should be more patient, maybe I should be less emotional. But the truth is, you weren't too much. You were simply asking the wrong person to meet you in a place they didn't know how to stand. So the woman they stay for learns something brutal, but freeing. Love that costs you your peace is too expensive. She learns that butterflies can be a warning, not a blessing. She learns that if her nervous system is constantly activated, if she's constantly guessing, constantly waiting, constantly proving, that is not romance, that is anxiety. And she refuses to call anxiety love, no matter how strong the attraction is. And this is where it becomes emotional, because letting go of the chemistry story feels like letting go of hope. It feels like admitting that the connection you felt might not be enough. It feels like grieving the future you imagined. It feels like facing the reality that desire is not commitment, and intensity is not safety. And grief hurts, but grief also clears you. Grief burns away fantasy and leaves you with truth. So when an avoidant pulls away, she does not chase the high of reunion. She does not romanticize the return. She doesn't say, they came back, so it must be real. She says, they came back, now let me see if they can stay. Because anyone can come back when they feel lonely. Anyone can say sweet things when they feel guilt. Anyone can be present when it's easy. But can they show up consistently? Can they communicate? Can they repair? Can they handle closeness without disappearing? And if they can't, she doesn't turn it into a mission. She doesn't take it as a personal challenge. She doesn't try to win love like it's a prize. She simply recognizes what she is looking at. An emotionally unavailable pattern, a push-pull cycle, a nervous system that treats love like danger. And she chooses herself. Now, here's the secret. This is exactly why they stay for her. Because she is not seduced by the cycle. She is not addicted to relief. She is not impressed by minimal effort. She doesn't clap for basic communication. She doesn't reward inconsistency with endless loyalty. She has the kind of emotional maturity that says, if you want to be with me, you don't just visit me when you're in the mood. You build with me, you show up, you stay present, you participate. And when an avoidant meets a woman like that, they feel something unfamiliar. They feel the weight of their pattern. They feel that their disappearing act won't be romanticized, it will be recognized. They feel that their hot and cold won't be called passion, it will be called instability. And that reflection can either push them away, or it can wake them up. But either way, she wins, because she does not lose herself in the waiting room of someone else's readiness. So if you want to become this woman, start by changing what you call love. Stop calling intensity love. Stop calling longing love. Stop calling chemistry love. Start calling consistency love. Start calling effort love. Start calling peace love. Start calling clarity love. Start calling presence love. And when you do that, you will feel the difference in your body. Your chest will soften. Your mind will quiet. Your heart will stop sprinting. Because real love doesn't feel like you're constantly trying to earn your place. Real love doesn't feel like a puzzle you keep solving. Real love doesn't feel like a roller coaster that makes you dizzy. Real love feels like being able to breathe. And the woman they stay for is the woman who chooses breathing over begging, peace over proving, patterns over promises, and stability over sparks. There is a moment in every avoidant dynamic where you realize you have been living on the edge of someone's attention. Like your peace is something they can give you or take from you. One text can lift you, one silence can break you, one warm night can make you believe again, one cold morning can make you question your worth. And the truth is, that is not love. That is dependency dressed up as devotion. That is your nervous system turning a person into a lifeline. And when a person becomes a lifeline, every distance feels like danger. And this is why the fifth keynote is the turning point. The woman they stay for makes closeness optional, not life or death. She wants love, but she does not need love to survive. She desires connection, but she doesn't collapse without it. She enjoys being chosen, but she doesn't lose herself when she isn't. And that energy changes everything. Because the moment you stop treating closeness like oxygen, you stop suffocating the relationship, and you stop suffocating yourself. Now listen to me closely. Making closeness optional does not mean you become careless. It does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you act like you don't need anyone. It means you stop putting your self-worth on a leash and handing the leash to someone who struggles to hold it. It means you stop saying, if you leave, I will be ruined. Because when you carry that fear, even quietly, it leaks into everything. It leaks into your messages. It leaks into your tone. It leaks into your patience. It leaks into the way you forgive things too quickly, the way you accept crumbs too easily, the way you over-explain because you're afraid they will misunderstand and pull away. Avoidants can feel that fear, not because they're mind readers, but because fear creates pressure, and pressure is exactly what triggers them. When they sense that your emotional balance depends on their consistency, they don't suddenly become more consistent. They become more trapped. They feel like they are responsible for your stability, and instead of stepping up, they step back. Not because you are wrong for wanting stability, but because they are not trained to respond to needs with presence. They're trained to respond to needs with distance. So the woman they stay for does something that looks simple, but is actually powerful. She keeps her life full. She doesn't make him her whole world. She doesn't revolve. She doesn't wait for a message to decide if she can have a good day. She has friendships that feed her, routines that ground her, goals that excite her, a life that belongs to her. And because her life belongs to her, her love does not come with a hidden ultimatum. It does not whisper, "Please don't leave me, or I have nothing." Her love says, "I want you, and I am whole without you." And that sentence is the medicine, because it takes the panic out of closeness. It takes the desperation out of affection. It takes the demand out of desire. It gives an avoidant something they rarely experience: closeness without obligation to carry someone else's emotional world. And when closeness stops feeling like a burden, it becomes something they can actually stay inside. But here is the part that makes this so emotional. You can only make closeness optional when you have done the inner work of making yourself your home. Because if you still believe that being chosen is proof you are worthy, you will always treat closeness like life or death. You will always feel like distance is rejection. You will always interpret silence as a verdict on your value, and you will keep trying to fix what you think is broken in you. When the truth is, nothing is broken in you. You are simply bonding to inconsistency, because your body mistakes unpredictability for love. The woman they stay for breaks that bond. She starts choosing peace like it is sacred. She starts treating her emotional stability as non-negotiable. She learns to sit with discomfort without reaching for someone who has not earned access in that moment. She learns to feel longing without acting from it. She learns that missing someone is not a command, it is simply a feeling, and feelings can be honored without being obeyed. So when an avoidant goes quiet, she doesn't spiral. She notices the silence, and she returns to herself. She doesn't chase, and she doesn't punish. She doesn't post for attention. She doesn't send a "just checking in." That is really a plea for reassurance. She simply holds her energy. And that is not because she is trying to get a reaction. It is because she is protecting her heart from a cycle that would drain her. She knows if someone wants to be close, they will communicate. If someone wants to stay, they will show up. And if they don't, she won't keep bleeding in private just to keep a connection alive. This is the moment you stop being controlled by the dynamic. Because in avoidant relationships, the person who cares more often becomes the one who carries the anxiety, while the avoidant carries the control. Not always intentionally, but the power shifts toward the one who can withdraw without guilt. The woman they stay for takes her power back, not by becoming cold, but by becoming free. Free from needing an answer right now. Free from needing reassurance to breathe. Free from needing their mood to determine her worth. And ironically, that freedom is what makes her so attractive. Because she is not trying to pull love out of someone, she is offering love from a place of abundance. She is not asking someone to complete her, she is inviting someone to join her. She is not waiting to be saved by attention, she is already living. And that is what makes an avoidant pause, because they cannot keep someone like that with breadcrumbs. They cannot keep her with half effort, they cannot keep her with occasional warmth. If they want her, they have to participate. And that is where the real shift happens. Closeness becomes a choice they must make, not a resource they can ration. When you stop treating closeness like life or death, you stop chasing. When you stop chasing, they feel the truth. They feel the distance they created. They feel the consequences of being inconsistent. And for the first time, the relationship is not being carried by your fear. It is being defined by their actions. Now, I want to say something gently but clearly. Making closeness optional also means being willing to lose them. Because if you are terrified of losing them, you will accept anything to keep them. You will tolerate confusion. You will tolerate disrespect disguised as space. You will tolerate being half-loved. But the woman they stay for has accepted a deep truth. Losing someone who cannot love you well is not a tragedy, it is protection. It hurts, yes, it aches, yes, but it also saves you from years of waiting and wandering and shrinking. So ask yourself, Have you been making closeness life or death? Have you been acting like their presence is your peace? Have you been handing them the power to decide if you are okay? Because if you have, I understand, but it's time to come back to yourself. It's time to build a life that doesn't collapse when someone gets distant. It's time to love in a way that feels steady, not desperate. It's time to become the kind of woman who can say, I care, I'm open, I'm warm, and I will not abandon myself to keep you. And when you become that, you become unforgettable. Not because you chased harder, not because you tolerated more, but because you loved with freedom. You offered closeness without pleading for it. You made love feel safe, because you were not using love as a way to survive. And that is the woman they stay for, the woman whose heart is open, but whose life is her own, the woman who can be close and still be okay.